Welcome to another episode of Bowcast. This is the archery podcast with the new school archer in mind. Bowcast covers everything from tips, techniques, and archery technology that will help raise your success in the field. And now, here is your host, covering the straight shot, Carrie Zilka.
This week we're talking about trail cams. We've got Trent Marsh, one of my favorite people on this planet. He is the editorial manager for Spypoint trail cameras, and he is going to teach us how to set up trail cameras properly. Trent, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Carrie?
It's going. It's spring, so depending on when people are listening to this episode, we're always thinking about trail cameras, whether you hunt public or private. Doesn't matter. I feel like if you hunt private, you're putting out trail cameras. If you hunt public, you wish you were putting out trail cameras. So, why don't you first give the rundown on your background with Spypoint trail cameras?
I've been Spypoint a little over a year now. I've been in and around the industry for about a decade, but jumped on board with Spypoint right before ATA last year, because if there's one thing anybody knows about the outdoor industry, it's the best time to start a job is the first week of January, and go from there. So started off running kind of our pro staff and our social media and a little bit of everything, and then this year transitioned into the editorial manager position. We just relaunched what we're calling Project Spypoint, which is our own content stream. So you can go to spypoint.com and see Project Spypoint, which is its blogs, its video series. We've got our Game Changers hunting series, that those episodes are dropping literally within 10 days of the hunt's ending. So we've got a turkey hunt up there from Florida already this spring, and a hog hunting episode dropped earlier this month. So we've got those. We've got Building Whitetails, which is a once a month video series about habitat and land management that Josh Pretzer's doing. We have a podcast as well. And then, like I said, we're doing anywhere between 2 and 4 blogs a month as well that are timely, and it's not trail camera content, it's outdoor content. We got a little bit of everything in there, so have people check that out.
Gotcha. That sounds excellent. Let's talk about your podcast. Obviously, since this is a podcast, other people might want to check it out. Tell us about your new podcast.
So Brian Stevens, who is the host of the podcast as well as the host of Game Changers, we're doing around one a month right now, and it's one of those things that we're really just kind of focusing on having conversations with our friends in and around the industry. First episode we did back in January is with Mike Stroff. We've had Michael Lee from Backwoods Life on. We had Josh Pretzer on talking about building whitetails, and we've had Dr. James Kroll. Dr. Deer was on last month. The episode that's coming out here in just a few days and should be out actually by the time this airs is an interview with Ralph and Vicky. So just kind of a good mix. The Doc Troll interview was, I could just listen to him talk about, seriously, just put Doc Troll on anywhere doing anything, talking about deer for 45 minutes, and I'm going to write down 30 things that I didn't know.
Right.
It's just a total Doc Troll brain dump. It was awesome. Lots of good stuff in there. So that's something we're excited about and still getting it out there. It's the Spypoint podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Wonderful. That's super cool. Without being jerks about it, why would you recommend Spypoint trail cameras over any other brands?
Anyone that knows me, and I know I've been on the podcast a couple times, and we've talked, and there's some folks that know I'm a real value-minded type of person. Like, that's just who I've never understood. I can go buy a $3,000 rifle that I feel bad about taking to the woods, or I can buy a $500 rifle that gives me performance that's really comparable, but isn't going to put me in the poorhouse to do it. So I'm always looking at things from a very utilitarian standpoint. I want value, and I want gear that's going to perform. I don't want that value to cost you performance, but I don't want to overpay just because for the sake of overpaying. So when you look, especially on the cellular side, at what Spypoint's history is and what Spypoint's focus has been, it has been driving the value proposition of cellular cameras. We last year introduced the Link Micro, and that was a camera that was cellular, and you could find it retail at $150. That was, even 3 years ago, that would have been, you can't do that. Cellular cameras are $500.
Yeah.
So we're working to drive that value, especially, again, on the cellular side. We've got a non-cellular lineup that's got some pretty impressive features as well. But it really is, it's a value performance balance is what sets Spypoint apart from most of what you're going to find. You can find really nice, expensive cameras, and you can find really cheap ones that'll work for 3 weeks. But I think we really try to live in that sweet spot of solid quality products that are still affordable.
What about and I guess for me, the biggest turnoff with the cellular cameras has always been the monthly, like, per camera at $40 a month per camera. I'm like, are you crazy? If you have 5 of them, that's like $200 a month. That's somebody's car payment. What sort of price points are you looking at for a monthly subscription with your cameras?
So that's kind of an onion question. There's layers to that. So first and foremost, the one thing that people need to understand with Spypoint cellular trail cameras is whatever your personal carrier is does not factor into your decision. Like, let's just get that out there right now. This is in no way tied to your personal cellular provider or plan. It just isn't. So there are 2 models, carrier models of every cellular camera that we offer. The nationwide model basically covers every national carrier except for Verizon. So if you're in Wisconsin, I know there's holes up there with both Verizon and AT&T, but that the other one gets good service. You could say, okay, I've got US Cellular here, or I know this is a Verizon property. Then you can pick the carrier models, and you can have a mix of carrier models on your account. It's not, well, I have a Verizon phone, so I have to go to the Verizon store and add this Verizon camera to my Verizon plan. That's not how it works with Spypoint. So you just pick the carrier model that is going to give you the best signal performance wherever it's deployed. That's kind of the first step to the plan aspect. Your photo transmission plans are then purchased directly from Spypoint in the app or on the website. So you can purchase that on a month-to-month basis or on an annual basis. Annual basis, of course, is going to be your best value. Spypoint is super unique in that we are the only company that has both a free and a truly unlimited option. So you could buy a cellular camera and never pay for a photo transmission plan. And every month you will get the first 100 images that are taken sent to the app free. We will never charge you if that's all you want to do. 100 pictures. Now, that might work on some deep woods trails, but if you've got the camera set up over a feeder or a mineral lick, you might burn through 100 pictures in 3 days.
Right.
If you're okay with that, you can do that, but you still get that little bit of, okay, I didn't have to go pull the card. And then any images that are taken after that 100, those go onto the SD card, and you can just go check it like you would a non-cellular camera. From there, you can go month to month, and that truly unlimited plan that I talked about, that's $15 a month if you go month to month, or it's $10 a month if you pay for the whole year up front. So
that's really inexpensive.
Quite a bit cheaper than a lot. There are some other ways that it can be less inexpensive, but typically those tie you to a specific cellular provider. So again, when we talk about balance and value, this gives you the flexibility to be able to use multiple carriers and not be tied to a specific plan or your personal plan, but at the same time not be paying, I'm not going to mention any other company's names, but I know for a fact there's a plan out there that it's not unlimited. It's capped at 80,000 images, and it's $349 a month.
It's insanity.
Per camera. And 80,000. I know 80,000 images sounds like a lot, and it is, but the unlimited plan is that's why it's the truly unlimited plan. Whatever pictures that get taken by that camera are going to get sent.
That's neat.
$10 a month.
That's cool. That's really reasonable for the average Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about camera placement. What would be your number one tip that you would give someone who's never put up a trail camera before in their life?
The absolute most important thing, and I don't care how many times people hear it, is make sure you're not set up at 90 degrees to what you're trying to take pictures of. You see people talk about trigger speed, and a lot of times they're confusing shutter speed with trigger speed. They'll see a blurry night picture and say your trigger speed was off. Well, no, that's shutters. That's photography. That's completely different. But your trigger speed, when you're looking at trail cameras, cellular, non-cellular, your trigger speed is the amount of time that it takes for that camera to go from sleep mode to taking a picture. So if we talk about, we've been talking about the Link Micro, we'll talk about it again. It's a half-second trigger speed. So from the time an object moves into that sensor range and wakes the camera up, you've got a half a second before that camera takes a picture, which is fine if it's a deer walking 15 yards away from the camera, kind of picking through a bean field, right? If it's a mature buck trotting after a doe and you've got it set up on a trail 3 yards away, you're going to get an empty frame. You're going to see nothing in the picture because he was moving fast enough that by the time the camera was triggered and woke up, he was already gone. So you need to make sure, like on a trail, you don't set it up with the camera facing the trail at a perpendicular, looking right at it. You want to be looking back down the trail so that as the deer approaches it, it's got a long time. You'd always rather have 4 or 5 pictures of a deer than hope to get one, right?
Gotcha. Oh yeah, because if you've only got like a 10-foot area and they're hoofing it, they're through that area before that camera even gets a chance to take that. Okay, I see what you're saying with the 90 degrees. So you don't want it, if you're facing the trail, if you're leaning up against the tree and you're facing the trail, you would want to pivot to the right and face it that way, or pivot to the left and face it rather than straight on. Right,
so that you catch them either coming or going. So if the trail runs north and south, you don't want to face the camera east.
Right.
And just have that little cone of triggering and photo taking capabilities. You want to face it north-northeast or north-northwest or, whatever, so that it's along that trail, so that instead of just getting triggered as it walks by, as that deer is approaching the camera at 100 feet away, at 60 feet away, at 40 feet away, it's constantly being triggered to take that picture.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I am absolutely 100% guilty of pointing it directly at the trail. Because you just assume you want it to trigger as they're walking past. Yeah. Huh.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's another thing, like, even not just placement, but when you're selecting cameras, like, you have people that put because nobody has one trail camera. Nobody. You've got 5 trail cameras. You've got 8 trail cameras, right? You don't have one. But part of that is like choosing the right camera for the right placement. So the Micro is a half-second trigger speed, which is actually on the slower end of the Spypoint trail cameras. So for me, that's something I'm going to put over a mineral station. That's something I'm going to put over a feeder. That's something I'm going to put over like a ditch crossing where they might slow down a little bit, right? Around a food plot, that type of thing, where it's not a heavy traffic area where the deer are always moving. For something like that, I'm going to look at our Force Dark. The Force Dark it not only has our hybrid illumination technology flash, but it also has the fastest trigger speed available. It's 7/100ths of a second trigger speed. 7/100ths, not 7/10ths, 7/100ths of a second trigger speed. So that's a camera that you're literally taking almost half a second off the trigger time compared to the Link Micro. So if I've got a trail where there's just nowhere good for me to catch those deer pausing, I'm going to use the Link Dark or the Link S, or even like the Solar Dark, Force Dark in our non-cellular range that also have that super fast trigger speed. I'm going to put that on a trail. I'm going to put I don't want to put a camera there that's going to fail and then blame the camera, because that's my fault, right? I want to put the camera in the right place to do the right thing.
That's interesting. I guess I never really thought about that. Because if you're hunting over food plots compared to putting up trail cameras over trails, I gotcha. All right. I am on the same page. That makes sense.
Just make sure they're in the right position to do the right thing. You got a fast trigger fast trigger speed camera. Make sure that's on the trails. Then put those slower cameras out, like I said, on food plots or wherever that they might be milling around a little bit more.
Gotcha. What do you think is the number one question that your support line gets, or that people ask about not only just your cameras, but trail cameras in general?
I think they run into support questions around firmware. And firmware is something that a lot of times people think about with cellular trail cameras especially. But even non-cellular trail cameras have firmware updates. For anybody most of your Bluetooth devices have firmware updates. If you think about it in terms of your phone, how often do you have to do it's a system update to your phone? We'll do those 6, 8, 10 times a year and nobody bats an eye. But then their camera stops working and they call and they wonder why. Well, your firmware's out of date. Well, why do I need to update my firmware? Well, there's a lot of reasons. We might be fixing bugs with the camera. We might be improving cellular reception. All the reasons that your phone would do a system upgrade are the reasons that we would want to upgrade a cellular trail camera specifically. Might not be the same thing with your non-cell cameras, but we might still have firmware updates that can improve battery life or overall camera performance, sensor performance in firmware updates for non-cellular cameras. And I think it's something that people often overlook or don't understand why it applies. The day new firmware comes out, your camera is not going to stop working. But if you're not updating your firmware a couple times a year, at least once a year, if you're 4 or 5 or 6 revisions behind, just like your camera, there's all kinds of stuff on your phone that's going to quit working. Your camera's going to do the same thing. Eventually, you're just going to reach critical mass where not enough things have been updated. And it's one of those things where, like with Spypoint, you can update, and pretty much everybody's procedure is the same way, is you're just putting updated firmware on your SD card, and then when you load your SD card, the camera recognizes that there's new firmware, it updates it, and you're done. So a lot of folks are doing it this time of year. We're past shed hunting season, but we're not in hardcore scouting mode. So, all right, let's go collect the cameras, bring everything home, clean it, assess for squirrel damage. Everybody gets fresh batteries. Everybody gets topped off. Go through and update all your firmwares. Do all of that, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, or if you don't put them back out until more like June or July and you've got them home for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, just use that time to make sure even non-cellular cameras don't have firmware updates that are available, and make sure you're just kind of testing those cameras out at home. Throw them up in the backyard. Make sure you're not running into issues so that you don't wait till the cameras are back out in the woods to need that support piece.
That's a good point. Do you suggest, how would I practice with them in the backyard? So I hunt a lot of public. So obviously when I'm out there, I want to make sure I am setting myself up for success. And you could set it up in the backyard to test it out. What tips would you give somebody to do that?
Truthfully, I even just set them up in my office. Especially a cellular camera. When I first activate that, I'm activating it, I'm putting it on my desk, and I'm letting it run there for an afternoon to make sure that it's taking the pictures and that the pictures are coming through to my app.
Do you get photos
I'm sitting at my desk.
Do you get videos too?
You can take Spypoint cameras, you can take videos, and the videos will save to the SD card, and whatever triggered the video action will be recorded as an image. So it takes photo first, and then it rolls video. And then when you go pull the cards, you can have the videos, but in the meantime, you can see what was there to be like, okay, is this just a bunch of does walking by, or do I have a 180 working the scrape and I want to see that video? You can make sure you go get that card pulled the next time you're in the area.
Gotcha. Cool.
But yeah, just like I said, whether it's your office or your backyard, just make sure that it's all working properly before, okay, this is brand new. I just left Bass Pro and I'm going to drive straight to the woods and throw it out there.
Yeah.
Especially for folks that have never used a cell camera before. It's not difficult, but it's different. So make sure you understand how the whole activation process works and that there's no issues, and that, we always recommend double checking the firmware even when the camera is bought new, just because the latest firmware went on the camera when it went into that box, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been a firmware revision since the store got the camera. You don't know how long that inventory was sitting there. So it's good practice to just immediately make sure you're using a freshly formatted SD card, make sure you're double checking that the firmware is the most up-to-date possible, and then run that camera around the house as a test, just to make sure that it's sending what you want it to send. Because from a troubleshooting standpoint, it's always better to have that device in your hand rather than to call customer support and say, I'm having troubles. Okay, well, do you have the camera? No, it's 40 miles away in a woods. There's only so much you can do with that.
Gotcha. And would you give any tips for people who are putting trail cameras out on public land versus private land?
Obviously, when you're, it's a concern anywhere, but security is going to be your main issue on public ground camera placement. So you can go with cable locks. We've got 16 gauge steel security boxes. Regulations vary from state to state in terms of how you can use those, but like our steel security boxes actually have holes in the back so that you can lag or screw those boxes directly to the tree. So there's no strap to cut to be able to take it down. It's locked, it's padlocked, and it's screwed to a tree. You can get pretty aggressive in the way that you're protecting that camera. And our cellular cameras, you've got, it's not GPS where if somebody takes that off the tree and throws it in their garage, you can pull up your app and you can go and see where that camera is. That's not how it works. But if somebody steals your camera with the intentions of wanting to use it for themselves, you should always be keeping a record of your the SIM numbers of the cameras that you have. So whether that's a screenshot of the status page of the app so that you have your SIM numbers, or just a spreadsheet that you keep on your computer. If you've got those SIM numbers and it gets stolen, you can reach out to customer support and say, hey, I had camera SIM number on my account and it was stolen. And they can check and see, has that camera tried to be activated or whatever the case may be, and then they can give that information to local law enforcement so that you can try to collect that device. They're not going to be able to, if Joe Smith activated that camera, they're not going to say, oh, yeah, Joe has it now. Here's his address. Go kick his teeth in and get your camera back. We're not going to let you do that, but we can get you as much information as we can to help you recover that camera, and that's just not possible with the non-cellulars.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, cool. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find out more about Spypoint trail cameras and where they can find out more and connect with you if needed?
Spypoint.com is going to be the best place to go for all of the latest information. That's going to have all of the new 2020 products that are coming out, which I will touch on that real quick. Mm-hmm. I would guess a lot of your listeners saw the Cell Link that we launched at ATA this year. It's a handy-dandy little universal cellular adapter that can turn a non-cellular camera into a cellular device. So you've got a half a dozen other camera. Doesn't have to be a Spypoint camera. As long as it uses a standard SD card slot, you just plug every Cell Link's coming with an SD cable adapter. It plugs in place of the SD card. You mount the Cell Link directly above the camera, and when it takes a picture, it's going to write it to the micro SD card that's in the Cell Link, and it's going to send it out just like it's a cellular camera.
Huh. That's interesting.
You can find more information about the Cell Link and everything else that's new for 2020, as well as all of our legacy product at spypoint.com. You can find our YouTube channels, youtube.com/Spypoint. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. You can interact with us there and stay up to date with all the latest product information, as well as that new content stream that we've launched, Project Spypoint.
Excellent. Well, cool. Well, thank you again for coming on the show and supporting Bowcast and helping me and the listeners learn a little bit more about trail cameras.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Carrie. Appreciate you having me on.